Good evening, this is Kim Hammer, pastor of Saline Baptist Church, Community of Tull, outside Benton, with your evening devotion. It's going to be taken from the book of Numbers, chapter 27. The book of Numbers, chapter 27, begins with a story involving 5 sisters, and their dad had died during the 40 years of which Israel was wandering in the wilderness. And we find that these 5 girls are mentioned over in Numbers, chapter 26, and verse 33, when it is that God is taking a census of the people. Now, these 5 girls were in the lineage of Joseph. And when you read chapter 26 and verse 33, or you read the lineage of Joseph, you find that there are over 52,700 people that are mentioned by number, but not by name. There are very, very few that are mentioned by name. But these 5 girls managed to have their names written in the lineage of Joseph. And now we see them showing up in Numbers chapter 27. I think that God was using this as an example so that he could address an issue that Israel had to take on with regards to inheritance, and when a man died and he did not have any sons to leave the land to. So these 5 girls are in a situation where their dad died and they were not going to be able to inherit the land that was going to be allotted to him under the census and the distribution method that God set up in Numbers chapter 26. So they decide, and it shows great courage on their part, because these are 5 ladies that in the day in which this is being written, the custom was that they were not to approach as the manner in which we're going to see them approaching in chapter 27, but it shows some real courage on their part, but it also shows some real trust in their God that he would treat them fairly. And so these 5 girls are going to come before Moses, before the priest, and they're going to come before the leaders of the nation, and they're going to come before the whole assembly in front of the tent of the meeting. And they are going to plead their case. So this is a public display where everybody is going to hear what is said. Now, what's interesting to note is that these girls talked about their dad. And the one thing, or the 2 things that they wanted everybody to understand, was that their dad was not affiliated with Korah, who had gathered together 250 of the leaders of Israel at the time to lead an insurrection against Moses and subsequently against God back earlier in Numbers, I believe it was chapter 16. And so they wanted to make a clear distinction that their dad died in the wilderness, but not as part of that insurrection. The second thing is they did not deny that their dad had sinned, and as a result of his sin, that's what caused his death with so many others while wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. And so they were very open and very transparent and very direct and very courageous about the way they went about handling this. I think part of the reason maybe why they wanted to make this distinction is because they knew they would be going before Moses, and they wanted to make sure that Moses knew that their dad had nothing to do with that. And so they come before Moses and before all the people, the priests and the elders, and they plead their case that, look, we're in a situation that is not of any fault of our own, and we feel that we're entitled to the inheritance that our father received that could not be passed down to us because he had no sons. And Moses and everyone heard the case, and then Moses turned around and he went and he sought the Lord. Now Moses could have taken matters into his own hand, but showing some real spiritual maturity of Moses, he went before the Lord because this was something that he needs some spiritual guidance on. And we find that God sided with the 5 girls, and he said, yes, this is correct, and we need to address this as a nation. And so God established within the law, in the book of Numbers chapter 27, he established within the law the mechanism so that if there was ever a situation, a girl like these girls found themselves in, that they would be able to receive their inheritance that was rightfully theirs. And this became a permanent law in the book of law of the Israelites. Now, I think that this shows a couple things. Number one, it shows some real courage on the part of the girls, that they knew what was right, they knew what was fair, and they were willing to put themselves in a position that was by custom, not traditional, but they knew it was something that they needed to stand up for, not only for their part, but for everybody that would come behind them. And that's a real sign of courage, that you're willing to put yourself in a position in order to plead for that which is right and be able to set the trend for those that are going to be coming behind you. The second thing is, I think it shows real spiritual maturity on the part of Moses, that he didn't try to take this matter on himself, because after all, everybody listened to the situation and they were looking for Moses for an answer. and Moses went to the Lord, which shows some real spiritual maturity on his part. The next thing is we see that God showed a compassionate side because he recognized that something needed to be addressed in dealing with this situation, and God issued a ruling fairly, understanding the situation that they were in. To me, this shows a part of God that whenever it is that people are left in a vulnerable situation, that he wants to make sure that there's a pathway forward to where their needs can be taken care of and that all things are right. When we take a look at this situation, please remember that this started back over the book of Numbers chapter 26 and verse 33, where of 52,700 people, these 5 girls had their name mentioned. I don't think that was in a situation of coincidence. I think that God was identifying them so that he could come back later and address an issue that needed to be taken up now that the Israelites were about to go and inherit their promised land. God is all-knowing, and God understands that there are situations that are going to arise, and he has an answer for each and every one of them because we see the wisdom and the insight of God. Whatever it is, situation that you have, God has an answer for it too. Hope you have a great evening.